Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, what I was going to talk about was, well, um, you might want to. Can I get you guys to pin me? Can I? Oh, I can. I can't pin for all. So I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that. There we go. That works. Um, Move things around so I've got the chat and the stuff. So yeah, what I'm going to tell you about is how we tried to teach anatomy when we weren't allowed to have students in the anatomy lab. Because as you can imagine, when we teach anatomy, well, we like to use cadavers and plastic models and things like that, and our students were stuck at home and they weren't allowed in. Um, that's the. You'll see what I'm on about as we go through. So when we teach anatomy, we like to teach in smaller groups, nice and interactive, get students touching things, doing things, writing things, studying things. You know, anatomy is about studying the thing rather than being taught about the thing. So we have lots of spaces and we have lots of stuff and we have nice rooms, a nice labs that we can use for studying human material, bodies and cadavers and what have you. And our normal method of teaching for medicine is that we would have um, 5 stations. We'd have we'd have an anatomist like me who's expected to teach anything, and we'll use all sorts of different methods. We'll have surgeons who prefer teaching with cadavers and bodies because that's like their home turf. That's what they're comfortable with. We have radiologists teaching anatomy through radiology, which is how most doctors will experience the anatomy when they're actually working. And then we'll have more anatomists, and we'll have other health professionals. Like we'll pull in dentists when we're talking about teeth, we'll pull in a speech therapist when we're talking about the larynx, and they'll add so much more so much more meaning to what it is we're trying to teach the students and get them to study. And then we'll have the pathologists, so we're looking at the building blocks of the body and talk about what goes wrong. Um, So this is what the room looks like when we're teaching. It's jam-packed, full of students doing things. It's very active. They're all talking, they're all discussing, they're all asking the teachers questions. What we're putting in front of them is provoking those questions. And then during COVID, well, you know, we had this. We had a big empty lab, and we had to work out how we might try and keep the good things that we think we do, how to keep that variety of teachers, that variety of people who use anatomy in their day-to-day jobs, and keep them happy, because I'm sure you've all experienced it. It's not easy teaching over Zoom or teaching over Teams, particularly if you're not doing it regularly. Um, so I've been making videos for a while now and sticking them up on YouTube. And by forcing yourself to make a video every week, you kind of, well, you get the hang of dramatic lighting, if nothing else. Um, you get used to filming things, how to show things in 3 dimensions, how to explain things, and lighting is a big part of that if you're trying to show the shape of something. Um, and you develop a little bit of kit bit by bit. So I accumulated a pile of stuff and skills, and then applied this to this problem. And to talk about gaming as well, some of you might be aware of Twitch. Twitch is a platform where people sit at home playing games and the world watches them. And it's really popular. It's massive. It's huge. This is part of the normal experience of the students that we're getting there. And there are lots of lessons we can take from Twitch. If I pick a fairly typical streamer, this is Mandy. She's a young Canadian. She's a regular streamer, and if you pick any regular streamer, you'll see that what they're streaming live over the internet is themselves. They're well lit. The quality of their video feed is really good, even though they've got a limited bandwidth. Their background lighting is good. You can see she's added lots of lovely graphics there, and they're very, very organized. They're very, very good at streaming, at delivering live video in a clean, pretty, accurate way. And they're doing this from home on a very low budget. So surely us people at universities can do something similar, right? So this is what I built. This is Chris. He's another one of our anatomists. And sure, it got a little bit over the top after a while. It didn't start off like this, but it kind of grew. But we've got a very nice camera here, which wasn't a very nice camera when we started. It was just your bog standard camera, and then it just got a bit better. It's got a little monitor on top, so the speaker can see what the camera can see. This is the laptop that's actually streaming everything that we're streaming. We've got a nice big infill light. It's lovely to have a big soft light because as we're getting older, it makes our wrinkles a little bit softer. We look a bit nicer. There's an infill light there, so there aren't too many harsh shadows. So when we're demonstrating models and what have you, it looks good. There's a big screen there for the presenter. So we had lots of different people come in to teach. And we needed to work out how they could take what they had and plug it into what we had. So we set this up so we could plug in their laptops or their PowerPoint presentations or whatever they had, and they would see what was going out to the students here. So they had a clear idea of what it was the students would see, even though we had all this paraphernalia up here. And then, because I got bored, we had lots of colourful lights in the background because I was doing this a lot during COVID. So this is what it looked like from, this perspective. This is what it looks like from the other side of the camera. You can see Chris is nicely lit. We've got a contrasting background, which is a little bit darker, so it makes things pop a little bit. And it's all, well, from what the students see, it looks nice and tidy. But in reality, it was a bit of a mess, but a functional mess. So as I said, that's our presenting laptop there. So the presenter could stand up and walk around. My job was to manage everything if I wasn't teaching. So I would also look after the camera. So as people moved around, I would move the camera. I'd zoom in and out and adapt to whatever it is they wanted me to do. And so we could adapt to different positions. So if this is the presenting Zoom stream, this other computer that's part of the room back here and the projector up here, this is a second Zoom instance, as in, so this is like a viewer. This is like the co-pilot has also got access. They're also watching the stream, so they could check the audio quality and listen to it up here. But also it meant that whoever was teaching could see the audience up on the screen. And this worked really well for like 2 weeks probably. And you can see what happened. As usual, everybody switches their screens off and you're just talking to a screen of names and blank faces with the hardcore few showing their faces. But you could see the chat up here. You could also see the chat at the speaker's computer. So having a co-pilot, having a support person meant that whoever was teaching, they only had to focus on the teaching. They could always rely on the other person to solve the problems, to do the awkward stuff, to relay questions when they popped up. So it kept that cognitive load down and they could focus on what they were thinking about, what they were trying to teach. And it meant that because a lot of our teachers are irregulars, we get them every year, but we only get them 2 or 3 times a year. They could come in and I could just tell them, don't worry, I'll look after you. Just do your thing. And the key thing we learned was to take your time. So if the teacher took their time, didn't feel like they were rushed, everything worked fine, and the students this was like it was like a show for the students. Like, they were at home, but we were giving them a bit of a show. They knew I was there because we had 2 mics up so they could hear me heckling in the background, and we would we'd talk about show this, move to this, move to that, move to the other, and the students were very relaxed with that. It was fine. So this is what it looked like from the back. We had multiple methods of showing things. This here, there were a whole bunch of visualizers being chucked out. There was about 6 of them going to the skip. So of course I grabbed those and we repurposed a couple of them. So we built this top-down camera, which has got a crap camera on it, but we then stuck a cheap ring light underneath it, and you can turn a crap camera into a good image if you give it good light, essentially. So then we were able to have a top-down camera to put models and whatever we wanted into this sort of position. Surgeons are happiest talking over a cadaver that's led down. We didn't want to use cadavers in our online Zoom teaching. One, it's really hard to show three-dimensional anatomy on a cadaver because it's lost its color. It's all kind of grey and misshapen, and you can't move from one structure and up and down so easily, which, as you do in a cadaver. You follow structures up and down to work out what they are. And also, we had people, older students who have got families at home. We didn't want to be pushing video of cadavers into homes. We didn't know who else was there. And we certainly didn't want to be sharing identifiable information of cadavers, which we wouldn't keep control of. So you can see there are lots of issues that were easily solved by saying, we're not going to stream video of cadavers. So by presenting this to surgeons, they were immediately happy. They had, we've got somebody that's led down. These models are really good, and they could do their usual thing in this way. So this is one example of another video source that we could plug into the setup, and this is one of the things that we used. This is, as it says on there, an HDMI video capture dongle. HDMI comes in here. So you could capture HDMI from any source. My top-down camera, another camera. Someone turns up with a laptop and they normally do HDMI out to a projector, right? Well, they're just projecting to this now. So they could project their laptop into my system, converts it, sends it out as a USB connector, and I'll show you how that gets picked up. These cost £10 from Amazon. I've got a drawer full of them now. I was very skeptical. They're brilliant. They work really well. This is the brains of the outfit. So here's a bog standard laptop, one of our normal teaching laptops, nothing special about it. You can see we're running Zoom on there, but we're using OBS, which I'll talk about in a moment, a bit of software to pull together lots of different video sources to give the sort of output that I'm giving to you now. So we've got video sources coming in here. That goes out to the big TV. Sorry, those are the video sources coming in. That goes out to the big TV. That's coming in from the camera. That's a USB hub, so we can plug even more things in. This is the microphone input. But there was nothing special about this laptop. The key thing we learnt, and the key thing, I think we already knew this, was dongles. In anatomy, we're quite proud of the fact that we tell everybody, you turn up with what you like, we will manage you. We've got dongles for everything. Any laptop that turns up, we should be able to power it, and we can plug it into any of our projectors. And in this case, we could plug it into our streaming system. And that worked really well because we always had a dongle we could go to and hook everything up. It meant that everybody was happy. And because we're so used to this collection of dongles, it made everything quicker and streamlined what we did. Wireless microphones, a little bit flashy. There are lots of different ways of capturing audio, and we decided to do this. So these are, I don't know, 150 quid each, something like that. These Rode wireless mics. They have they've got a 3.5mm connector. What have I done now? Sorry, I just switched from my full screen Zoom. Hold on. There we go. So these have just got 3.5mm outputs which go to the computer. This is the receiver, and then this is the sender. So this is the microphone. You clip it onto the talent, they can wander around, and the audio will always be good. So we only had one of these to start with, and the students, one of the first bits of feedback we had was students wanted to be able to hear what I was saying as well, so we bought a second one. And these got dropped and abused, and people walked off with them. I chased at least one pathologist down the street because they were still wearing it on their way back to clinic. But it made the audio really, really good. One thing I'd say is audio can be really awkward to capture onto laptops because that 3.5mm socket is for a microphone and speakers. So you might want to spend time working that out beforehand and checking that it works, because you'll probably need the right adapter. And once we had the right adapter, we were fine. But if you're having problems with audio through the 3.5 mm input, just plug in a USB. USB mics are great. They work really, really easily. Very little goes wrong with them. So we had a couple of wireless microphones, and then we had these for the talent as well. Some people are more comfortable with clickers. They'd have a PowerPoint presentation. They're used to a clicker when they're standing there at the front of the room. They wanted a clicker when they were stood there in front of a camera, so we gave them that. And then we had a wireless mouse, so they could point at things. So this big screen here that showed to the presenter their presentation or whatever it was that was going out, we said to them, as long as you can see the mouse, the cursor on here, the students will also see the cursor at home. I'm using a red laser dot today, but we were using a massively enlarged cursor so that people could point at things to keep that interactivity, to make sure that the students would keep up with what the teacher was pointing at. Little tips and tricks like that. But that big screen was really, really useful. And then this is the thing that makes it slick. This is the Stream Deck. This isn't a novelty item. This is a standard piece of kit for anybody that streams on Twitch, and we found this really useful. So this is the sort of thing I can use, now to flip between my standby mode or my camera, or go back to my presentation, or I can flip to some anatomy software and play around with that, or we can go to a web browser and we can take the students through the learning outcomes for the week or Canvas or what have you. And it's super slick and tidy. These are about 60, 70 quid, something like that, I think. Consider the reason we bought these things was because we were doing this every week for many hours for more than a year. So this sort of thing grew. This, however, is very cheap. This is OBS, Open Broadcaster Software. It's open source. It's cheap. Most people probably know about it. When I talk about this at places like this, there's usually one or two people that say, yeah, we use this as well, or something very similar. It's amazingly stable, amazingly reliable, considering all the horrible things that we made it do. But this is what somebody streaming games will use to capture their game and then capture their camera, their webcam, and put the two together and then send out that video. And you can combine audio in the same way, although we tended to send the audio straight to Zoom. So you can pull together different video sources, be they external video sources or a window on your computer, and create any output you want. And most of those outputs are simple. So this is the sort of output we gave. This is blurry because this is a screenshot from the Zoom recording that was then uploaded by Zoom, and Zoom heavily compresses everything. I was a bit too busy to take screenshots while I was running all this as well. But you get the idea. This is what went out to students. So there's me demonstrating a model to the students. So, it's my lighting in here isn't good. It's a little bit dramatic, but when you've got a nice camera, you can zoom in and you can take the student around things and you can point at things, and you can, if you've got really good lighting, it gets nice and 3D, you get a little bit of a sense of depth, and you can describe things to students, and you can zoom in and zoom out, and simple things like that can be really effective, right? Here's Marcy doing something similar. So Marcy was using larger models, and having someone to move the camera is really helpful to zoom in and out as you start wide and get in tighter to smaller structures. This is the top-down camera. You can see the quality is a little bit crapper. It's a bit contrastier, but it was good enough for what we wanted to do. So you could use the top-down camera to demonstrate all sorts of things, and you can see, my face is in the way. Stick my face up there. You can see there's Marcy is down there in the bottom right corner. So you can see the person that's demonstrating whatever they're demonstrating as well. We could use Menti and Cahoots quite comfortably. So interaction was actually pretty good. They were pretty comfortable asking questions. And that was one of the advantages of doing it live, was that we had somebody interesting who would provoke ideas, and students could ask that interesting person questions and they would give interesting answers with lovely clinical tales and that sort of thing. But we used Menti and Kahoots as well to help foster all of that. We'd use web browsers and PDF forms, PDFs to take them through the learning outcomes from the week, keep them organized just as we normally would in teaching. And down at the bottom right there, that's Mike, one of our consultant anaesthetists. So most of our teachers were very nervous about this. I mean, they were pretty nervous about teaching by Zoom anyway, but the idea of coming to the anatomy lab and trying to do what they normally do, they were very uncomfortable with that. But once they'd done it once, or once they'd seen what we were doing, they settled into it. So Mike here was so comfortable with this that he was happy demonstrating physical procedures. We were talking about the anatomy of epidural anesthetics here, and he was showing very fine needles and talking about the processes of doing a lumbar puncture or an epidural anesthetic. So it was great. Radiologists are very comfortable with this sort of thing. Radiologists already live with computers, so they transitioned quite happily to another computer where they were pointing at things. And pathologists were similar. You could plug in a microscope to this system quite happily and do live microscopy, which we used to do in the olden days. But nowadays they prefer teaching with PowerPoint presentations as well, so they were comfortable. And then some of us took it took it too far, and I would have a PowerPoint presentation. This is a series of coronary angiograms overlaid with the camera, the live feed from myself, so I could wave my hands around and describe things, and also so they'd feel engaged with the speaker. And then also with a live computer-generated anatomy model, so that I could rotate these things and together we'd work out what's the orientation of the model to match what we're seeing in that angiogram. So what angle was this taken from? So what artery is this? What artery is this? And that sort of thing. So, it was very, very flexible. And that's how I would normally teach it in the lab, just with a big, a couple of screens and what have you. The other thing we did was a lot of 3D printing. We still do this now. Well, we did this before as well, but for example, for Hand Week, we felt it would be really helpful if students had in their own learning space a model of the bones of the wrist. And of course, buying anatomical models is really expensive. So I've been 3D printing models, and I printed, so 3D printed models of the bones of the hand and the bones of the wrist. These cost about 60-70p each, so they're super cheap. And students picked these up whenever they weren't often able to come in, but they could come in for integrated clinical methods or clinical skills training. So when they came in, they picked these up. So for Hand Week, they had these at home. We had them in the lab. We could take them through the bones. It was that one was really 3D, So that's what we did. What did everybody think about it? What did the teachers think? They liked not having to try and set up their own video teaching thing. They were doing it from various places. They liked being looked after. The clinical, in fact, all the teachers did. The anatomy teachers did as well. And they liked the quality of the output. The audio quality was good. The video quality was good. They liked the fact that it worked well. They liked the flexibility of being able to pretty much do what they normally did, because as group sizes have been getting bigger, they've kind of been falling back more to presentations. We're kicking them out of that habit now. Surgeons that teach with cadavers, they found that we have a really good collection of models, and they've started using the models more now for teaching. As you saw with that early slide where we have 5 stations, a teacher then has to repeat themselves 5 times and the students rotate around us. They liked only having to do it once to the whole year. I learnt a lot because I got to watch everybody teach for the first time ever. And watching these people talk about how they use anatomy in their clinical lives it was brilliant. It's added so much to my teaching and my knowledge. It was a lot of work for me, but it was really, really valuable. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. What do the students think? Student feedback was really positive. Um, Attendance was very good, even though it was recorded. Students said they liked having an event to be present at. Like it felt like I have something to get up for on a Monday morning. Okay, they didn't actually get out of bed for it. That's why their cameras were off. They told me, but they liked. I have to be awake, and I'm going to go to this session, and I feel part of the medical school. I feel part of the anatomy labs. I'm seeing the space that I will be allowed into one day. It was really important because the students we were teaching, they'd never been into the anatomy labs. They started like this. They started online. It was very interactive. Students asked really good questions. Some students are more comfortable writing in chat than they are putting their hand up at the front of a big lecture theatre. In anatomy, speaking, when we teach in small groups, we kind of get around that a little bit anyway because they kind of grab us at the end and have a chat if they're a bit nervous. So I reckon we lost a bit of that. But students said that as we went through the year and students were allowed to come back into the lab in either limited numbers or for scheduled periods, they felt really comfortable. They felt that I've seen these models before. I know how to study them. I recognize this space. It was a very small step instead of being potentially a big step, which was great because we expect students to be in the lab studying. And probably most importantly, exam results were normal, which was important to me. They did just fine. The future, we're getting more and more students. To be honest, I'm still making YouTube videos, but to be honest, we're getting rid of most of this and we're going back to face-to-face teaching because that is what we do in anatomy. We've got a three-pronged approach. We've got bespoke videos and podcasts and things for the students to read around, or they might want to read around a textbook or go to their own preferred resource the week before. Then we have the Monday session where they're with us and they're studying and they're doing things, and then they study. The third prong is when they study later in the week. So to be honest, we are pushing back to the practical teaching and we're not using this video setup anymore. But I'm pretty confident that less is more. Students still do well, even though we don't, as in because when we were teaching remotely, we couldn't teach everything in the way we normally would. We kind of limited a little bit. Students did absolutely fine. Yeah. So back to normal now. You can unpin me now. Sorry, I saw questions popping up or chat popping up. I haven't had a look at it yet.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I now have set up Envy. Definitely, David will say that he thought I did some quite fancy things with videos. No, I don't. And when you undersell yourself on YouTube because you have something like about 440,000 subscribers now, don't you?
So, yeah, it's got a bit out of control.
You're a little bit better than most YouTubers. So we do have a couple of questions that have popped up in the chat. David asked, if you only had 20, 30 quid to spend on one thing, what would you get?
It would either be a microphone or a light. Lighting is really important. And you don't need to spend much on lighting. You can do, but you don't need to.
Yeah, that's handy because I've got a microphone. So the shots for a light I go then.
Yeah, I reckon a light. Because even the microphone on the computer is good enough as long as you're close to it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas light can make pretty much any video better. Yeah, OBS is great, isn't it? How come anyone was allowed in the laboratory during COVID? So during COVID, teachers were allowed in to teach. We had God, I'm forgetting the name for it already. But we kept apart. We were masked up. We had procedures where we would, wash hands as we went in. In between each speaker, I would wipe everything down. Everything would get disinfected. Then we'd hand over to the next speaker. So we had a lot of procedures in place to manage that. Most of our teachers were working in a clinical environment, so they were in work anyway. We're next to one of the main hospitals. So on the one hand, we wanted to be particularly careful not to infect them because they're working clinically, and on the other hand, they were the ones most likely to infect us because they're working clinically. So so we were allowed to do that, and medicine gets a bit more leeway, I think, as well, because we have a longer year. There was less that we could do online. Things like students were allowed to come in and learn clinical skills, and we set up a method by which they were working in bubbles. So they had a new bubble because that was the only way to learn clinical skills, is if they come in and work clinically. For example, our final year graduated early so that they could actually go and join the workforce and help with COVID. So there were a lot of adaptations for teaching medicine related to COVID.
I think Daisy's got your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I was just going to ask you about now, when you said that you're basically back to normal, and that was a bit of a surprise, because what I found from the feedback, and I'm sure this is common to lots of people, is students absolutely love the video lectures being online, and they're much better for inclusivity, and there's all sorts of things. So, I mean, you must be integrating all this stuff you learned, and all these amazing resources now. So I just wanted to hear more about what do you think's changed, if anything. Maybe it's different in anatomy, but is there anything that's changed as a result of this experience?
So I was already doing a lot of this before COVID with YouTube. So the aim of that was to make videos for our students to give me more time to talk about anatomy. And by making a bespoke video, I can demonstrate what I want to demonstrate more carefully, at different, zoomed in, zoomed out, with just the right lighting, and I can add active labeling to it and that sort of thing. So I was already doing that, and I'm still doing more of that. So we're still using video for teaching, but creating asynchronous video is, I think, a more effective way of demonstrating things than synchronous video. And then they still have the opportunity for interaction when we actually do the teaching, which would be the thing that you lose from recorded video, right? Yeah, it's honestly. So there are a fair few studies out there that show that students learn anatomy more rapidly and more deeply if they look at a model or a cadaver with two eyes. They don't even have to touch it, but having that stereoscopic view of something in 3 dimensions makes it easier to understand. I've even got a 3D TV that I teach with because of this. So even if we demonstrate it really nicely with good lighting and good shadows and what have you, it's still on a flat screen. It's still harder for students to appreciate what it is we're trying to describe. The cadavers also show things that the models don't, and the cadavers are real sizes, real locations, the variety between different people, and that's so important. So that's why we've gone back to the way we've been teaching anatomy for about 400 years, is because it's a really effective way of doing it. And so we've had to kind of push everybody back, particularly the second years and the teachers, back to teaching in a more practical manner, doing things rather than standing there and giving a PowerPoint presentation. Sometimes that's appropriate. But the first years, the first years that we've got now, because this is just the way they've always experienced it, they're loving it. It's working really, really, really well for them. So I think in anatomy, we do tend to be a bit physical.
Yeah, you're also being volunteered for more work because David Bryson would like you to write this up for a publication for the Journal of Visual Communication in Medicine, Sam.
Sure. Yeah, I keep writing these things up, and then I keep getting more teaching and more students. But yes, I would love to. Yeah, thank you. Any others?
Yeah, are there any more questions from the audience for Sam if you want to unmute? Can't see anything else in the chat either.
Can I just come in just for Sam? Has he used any ultrasound in? Because one of our teaching fellows tends to get his liver out at times when we're teaching in sessions using the ultrasound.
So live ultrasound.
Yeah.
See, that's another good example of why this needs to be physical. Because we've bought half a dozen handheld ultrasound probes. It's fantastic technology, hooks up to an iPad, But watching somebody else do ultrasound is really awkward. But then doing ultrasound yourself, and your hand understands where the probe is pointing and how you're moving it, and you're looking at the image on the screen and you're going up and down, say, the limb, that brain-hand link is really important in learning. So trying to do that online is a difficult thing to do. So yes, we do.
And again, it helps, I guess, with the orientation aspects, because you're looking from, and you've got to get your head around the way the waves are going through to the tissue. Then you're working out which way up and which way is down, and you're putting the pieces together, which is essential for the teaching.
Exactly. And even when you just change the angle of the probe a little bit, so I'm pointing towards more the joint, I can see the joint, I'm pointing away from the joint. All of those little things you really notice when you've got it in your hand. Yeah.
And have you done any of the constructive stuff where you actually sort of have a skeleton, a model skeleton, and build the muscles onto it? Does that?
Our physician associate students are much happier doing that than our grumpy year 2 medicine students. But we're going to try and get our enthusiastic year 1 medicine students to do it. Yeah, like today we were doing skull stuff, so we were getting them to put the muscles of mastication on the skull. Yeah.
Thanks.
They like it more when we give chocolate for the best one. For some reason.
Gamification.
Exactly.